Welcome to our Australian English vs American English. This is Joseph and this is Artist. Joseph, can you introduce a little bit about yourself?
Sure, my name is Joseph and I am from Australia. I've lived all over the world, but I call Melbourne my home. And after finishing university there, I moved to Saigon. And yeah, here I am, and looking forward to engaging and comparing the differences between American and Australian English and culture.
Hi, I'm Matisse. I am from America. I have lived all over the United States, from coast to coast, in the north and the south, and I am a teacher here at VAS. I have lived in Saigon for 5 months now, and I'm looking forward to learning about Australian culture with all of you today.
Great. Where should we start? How should we start?
I could start with our greetings, I guess. A traditional Australian greeting is G'day, and that's just short for good day. You'll hear a lot of people say it in Australia. Not as often, I guess, not as often among younger people, but with the old generations, they love to say G'day. So,
yeah, we have this idea in America that that is what all Australians say. We think that that's the only thing that Australians say.
yeah, well,
Of course, in America, we have many different greetings.
Say, what's up?
Yeah, what's up? Hey, yo. We don't have one traditional greeting, and I don't think that people think of something like "good day" for American people. But that's what we think all Australian people say.
yeah. Well, hopefully today over the lesson we'll be able to sort of give you a better picture of the similarities and the differences between Australian and American cultures, and see that they're not so different, but in some ways they are.
Okay. Would you like to spot out some of the most obvious differences in the language? How you use some different words?
I guess in Australia, people are you could see that they're kind of lazy. Maybe laid back is the better word for it. So in the way that people communicate in Australia, they like to make it as casual as they can. They don't want to put a lot of effort into how they speak. So there's a lot of abbreviations. So they'll shorten a word and make it easier to roll off the tongue. So instead of saying good afternoon, I'll say good arvo.
Good arvo.
Arvo, yeah.
Just arvo?
Just arvo.
Sometimes that's hard for us to understand, right? Good arvo.
Yeah, it's one of those things that if you're talking to an Australian and they start abbreviating all these words, you probably think they're speaking a different language, especially with the accent, but it's just an easier way to say the same word. There's a lot of other ones. For instance, university. No one says university in Australia. They don't say college. They say uni. They'll say, one of the biggest ones I think in Australia, everyone loves to eat McDonald's, but no one calls it McDonald's. It's called Macca's.
Macca's.
Wow.
In America, we sometimes call it Mickey D's.
Mickey D's.
Mickey D's.
I did not know that.
You didn't know that?
No.
Oh, that is an urban pronunciation. Mickey D's.
Mickey D's. I actually like Mickey D's more than Macca's, for the record.
So apparently our girl is missed the introductions. We're talking about the differences between Australian English and American English. So ask any questions that you would like to ask about the differences.
Can I ask you some questions?
Please.
I always think that Australian English might be more like British English than American English. So, for example, what do you call an elevator?
An elevator is called a lift.
Okay, so you use the British terms for, how about a flashlight?
Torch.
A torch. Okay.
Or British.
Right.
We're like
Now,
British.
why do you think that both Australia and America were once British colonies? Why do you think that Australia has kept their connection with British English and British culture?
That's a good question. I think if you look at it at the core, a lot of the same similarities, so a lot of Australian identity is actually similar to British identity in the way that people, the sports, the interactions, the way that people like to drink tea, the way that sort of, there's a deep connection to the colonial elements of England, and they're still maintained because Australia is part of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is a group of countries that still follow the rule of the Queen. So at the highest seat of government in Australia is still the royal family from England. So there's a lot of elements that are very similar and carry through, but it's very interesting that Australians have sort of taken the same elements of the British culture and made them uniquely Australian. So the way they interact with the reverence to sport, how much they enjoy these sort of things, it's all uniquely Australian, but has its base in British traditions and customs, I'd say.
So you drink tea?
I don't personally. I can't drink hot drinks because it's always hot, and I prefer a nice cold beer, as a lot of Australians would also. But tea and having a nice cup of tea and a nice cake and a biscuit is quintessentially very Australian, but very British.
So do Australians prefer tea to coffee generally?
I'd say for the older generations, yes. For the youngers, coffee has become a very big part of the culture in Australia now. So everyone loves coffee, I'd say now. But tea, a lot of people probably wouldn't say no to a good cup of tea.
Yeah, in America, coffee is much, much more popular than tea. Everybody drinks coffee.
How do you drink coffee in America, in the US?
There are a few different ways. The most popular is just regular, we call it drip coffee, where you just have a filter with coffee inside and they just pour the hot water just like that. But also Italian style coffee, espresso is popular, and in the past 10 years, 20 years or so, big, sweet, fancy coffee drinks have become very popular in America. But in America, we don't really sit around and enjoy our coffee. We buy it, and we drink it really fast, and then we get really excited and go to work.
And it's interesting you say, in Australia, the way and the sort of the ceremony or the social aspect to coffee is very much a relaxed, lazy sort of excuse to waste a couple of hours and talk to your friend over a nice cup of coffee. And actually, you can, I'm not sure if this is common in other countries as well, but you can get a coffee called an Americano, which is just filter coffee and water, which
in America, we also have the Americano, which is, it comes from Italy.
Oh.
The Americano in the United States is one shot of very strong coffee, so a shot of espresso, like a tiny bit of really strong coffee, and then hot water. And the idea is that the Italians were trying to make coffee weaker, like American coffee is not very strong. American coffee is fairly weak. So the Americano is really strong coffee, a little bit, and then a lot of hot water. Oh, also, in America, many people drink their coffee with no sugar.
Okay.
Wow.
That is,
Do we have questions?
we have questions.
Excellent.
Is Australia still in Britain?
Australia is its own country. If you look at the flag, it still has the Union Jack. The symbol of Great Britain is still part of the flag, and you'll see 5 stars, and that's the Southern Cross. The Southern Cross is a deep connection to Australia, but it's not considered part of the United Kingdom, but it's still part of the Commonwealth, which is part of a group of countries, which also include Jamaica and India, who were once colonized by the British rule, and the British left a system of government in Australia and these Commonwealth countries, that has been adopted and carried through and is part of the country now.
What do the 5 stars represent?
You know, I can't quite say. There's a really nice, you can see them in the sky though, and I believe there's a deep connection with very Australian people, very passionate Australian people, similar to how we'd say sort of maybe rednecks, or deep patriots in America, who use the symbol of the Southern Cross as a deep personal identifier. And if you ever see an Australian person with a tattoo anywhere over their body of the Southern Cross, they're probably very Australian. Very Australian, I'd say.
It's like having an American flag in your arm.
The same thing.
Of course, yeah. We are very proud of our flag as well. The stars on the American flag, of course, they represent our states, our 50 states. Has nothing to do with stars in the sky.
And yeah. So Twin said you look gorgeous.
Oh, thank you very much.
Twin?
Twin, yeah.
Oh my
Twin.
goodness. Twin is a local celebrity here in Saigon. We feel so honored to have her watching our live cast.
And Dong asked us if you guys have tried Vietnamese coffee.
Oh yes.
Yes. Yes, I
You
have.
like cà phê Suda?
I love it. In fact, cà phê sữa is very popular in America right now. Vietnamese food is becoming very popular in America. You can find banh mi in every city now.
Wow.
There are even restaurants that make banh mi that are American restaurants with no Vietnamese people. You can buy banh mi at the grocery store in some places now. The deli will make banh mi.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's really popular. Cà phê sữa is really popular. You can get it everywhere now.
How about like just normal, traditional Vietnamese cafe?
No, they don't know. They don't know about that one.
No.
No. How about in Australia? Is it popular to drink café Suda in Australia?
I'd say yes, as the same you said that there's a rise of Vietnamese food and drink. In Australia there is definitely, there's a lot of Vietnamese people who live in Australia and who have moved to Australia and set up families and lives there. Banh mi, I found it very, very nice, and before I knew where it came from, I saw a beautiful piece of roast pork being cut into a nice little baguette. And initially I said no to the pate. I didn't want the pate spread in there because I didn't know what it was. But once I then moved to Vietnam, I thought...
Foie gras. Is it called foie gras?
Foie gras?
Foie gras.
Yeah.
Foie gras, yeah. Definitely. But I found that I have not had a stronger coffee in anywhere else in the world but in Vietnam. I can drink one coffee here and be ready to jump around for 5 hours, but in Australia, it's not as strong. It's not as strong at all.
And in America, I think even weaker.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question about Starbucks. Have you guys tried Starbucks in Vietnam?
No.
No.
So how about Starbucks in between the two countries, Australia and America? Is it different?
I don't know. I'll tell you about it in America. So Starbucks began in Seattle, which is a large city on the west coast of America, and it became so popular that every city has many Starbucks.
Wow.
In fact, in some places, you can stand at an intersection, there will be Starbucks on one corner, and you can look across at a Starbucks on another corner. We have Starbucks in every airport.
Well, it's like Circle K here.
Yeah, we have in San Francisco, there is a bank with a Starbucks inside the bank.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's really good business. Well, bank people, they drink Starbucks a lot.
Yeah.
Starbucks in Australia, there are quite a few Starbucks, but because, as I said before, coffee has become such a part of a social interaction that there's a lot of smaller independent cafes and deli sort of locations that have beautiful coffee beans that they import. And a lot of people would actually, in Australia, prefer to go to a local cafe and have the coffee there than pay more money and go to Starbucks. So you'd have a lot more supporting of local businesses, and big corporations like Starbucks are definitely there, but I'd say for everyone trying to spend a little less money and enjoy a more social environment, they would prefer to go to a local coffee place.
And do they grow coffee in Australia, or do they import everything?
They import a lot of things in Australia, and coffee is one of them. Because Australia doesn't really have, it has a beautiful climate, but growing climate, not the best for some things. And for coffee beans, I think Australians would rather leave it up to the people who have been doing it for a long time, the trusted coffee beans from around the world.
Indonesia and Vietnam.
Yeah, exactly.
Or maybe
Okay.
Hawaii.
Hawaii?
Yeah.
Excellent.
So Hawaii is closer to Australia than the United States. And they grow a lot of coffee there.
Beautiful soil from the volcanoes.
We have a really funny and good questions about differences between American beef and Australian beef.
Beef?
Yeah, I guess that's the one thing that Australian export, right?
Australia does export a lot of beef, a lot of cattle. There's a rich tradition of farming in Australia, and there's a big emphasis on quality products and quality meat. So people take a lot of care to raise cattle and to create the best product they can and sell it on. So Australian beef is always of a high quality and tastes very good.
American beef, well, we should point out that America is a much bigger country. There are 324 million Americans and only 24 million Australians. So we have some good beef. These cows are raised on the west coast of America and they eat grass. But a lot of people, no, in America, because we have so many people that we need to feed, many of the cows that are raised in the center of the country, they eat corn and other grains, and the meat is not very good. They grow the cows like this, shoulder to shoulder, and the cows do not walk around. They just stand and they eat corn or they eat other grains, barley, and the meat is actually not very good. So you can buy expensive and very delicious American beef, but it's much more expensive. Most of our beef is cheap and not really very good.
So we will come back to the questions in a little bit. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the cultural differences between Australia and America, and we will come back to your questions in just a little bit. So, what the biggest cultural difference that you think between Australia and America?
I think the biggest difference is how fast people move throughout the day. We have this idea that Australian people are very relaxed. Is this true?
It's true. It's always hot in Australia. The temperature can get very hot. So people don't like to make an effort to do things that would make them lose energy. It's sort of, they'll sit down quietly and they'll spread their legs out and spread their arms
Sound a
out.
lot like Vietnamese to me.
There's a very big similarity between the way Vietnamese people like to relax and the way Australian people like to relax, you know? Slow walking and an overall attitude that at the end of the day, it's all going to be okay. It'll all work out. Don't put too much stress on yourself or the people around you to try and get something done, because in the end, it'll happen as it's supposed to happen. So compared to American sort of society, from what I've seen, there's a more of an emphasis on building and working
And progress. Right? America really wants to stay number one. That's the most important thing for Americans. Americans love to work. They think that working is the most important thing. Americans will brag about how busy they are. They'll say to each other, I had to work 60 hours this week. And the other person will say, it's nothing. I had to work 80 hours. And then somebody else will say, well, that's nothing. I worked 100 hours 4 weeks in a row with no breaks. And American people are terrible at relaxing. They cannot relax because we think that if you relax, then you're lazy. Right? They don't like to stop. They like to keep moving. They like to work all the time. And they're just not good at relaxing. They're very, we say, high-strung, stressed out.
If one of your American friends had said to an Australian person, I worked 80 hours this week, and the Australian person probably would have said, you need to quit your job and you need to find something that's not going to put so much stress on yourself, because that's work obviously is very important, but there's a lot of elements sort of in the cultures of both countries that place an emphasis on different aspects. And maybe Australians can relax because they all live close to beaches.
Maybe.
Geographically.
So you saying American people choose to be busy?
It is part of our culture. We are taught from a very young age that it is very important to win. Right? Americans are obsessed with winning and with growing. So we think that the most important thing is hard work.
You think that geography, because Australia cities mostly like located like near the coast, so it's more relaxing because they're closer to the beach.
Closer to the beach, and if you were living closer to the beach, I'm sure anyone would be very much more relaxed in their everyday life. It's just lucky that a lot of the cities, as we said before, the difference in population is huge. There's 300 million more people in America than there is Australia. But, interestingly enough, Australia is a huge country that is almost the size of America. And everyone, in the middle of Australia, there's nothing. There's desert, just barren desert, and it's uninhabitable. It gets very hot there. So everyone lives near the ocean and around the coast on the east side. It's very relaxing, better climate, and everyone has a good time.
Yeah, in America, there are large cities all over the country. So, in terms of how big the country is, it is almost the same size as Australia, but we have only a few small deserts here and there, and the center of the country is, there are some mountains, and then some areas where there are a lot of fields, but we are not mostly desert. We're mostly places that are very pleasant to live, so we have large cities all over the country. Of course, most Americans live on the coasts, but the center of the country has lots of big cities, and you can drive from one to the other all over the country, and yeah, most of us don't live by the beach. But the people that do are more relaxed. And there must be something about living by the beach,
Yeah.
right?
There must be, there must be.
Okay, so back to the questions. American favorite food is cream and cheese. Is that correct?
Cream and cheese? Well, we do, American people, and I'm sure Australian people too, we love milk, cheese, ice cream,
Any dairy
cream,
product.
any dairy. We love milk. We both have a lot of cows, so we have a lot of milk. Maybe she means cream cheese. We have something in America we call cream cheese, which is like a very soft cheese that if the way that you eat it is you cut it with a knife and then you spread it on a bagel, which is a round piece of bread with a hole in the middle.
It's more like donut.
It's like a donut, but not sweet and not fried.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question is, what do Americans like doing in their free time? And how about Australians? So we're talking about leisure time. What do you do in your free time?
Well, Americans, they like to spend their free time talking about how much they work, and they like to talk about how little free time they have.
Okay. Complaining about not having enough free time.
Yeah, they like to complain about how little free time they have, because if you tell people, oh, I don't have any free time, then people will think, oh, he works very hard. He must be really good.
Okay. How about in Australia?
In Australia, people enjoy their weekends. People will turn off. They won't work on a Friday afternoon. They'll go to work.
Oh, really?
Oh, well, it's tough to get anything done on a Friday afternoon in Australia, I'd say. Time off is spent, depending on where you are in Australia as well. There's a big difference between the states of Australia. So one of the main states is Victoria, and that's where Melbourne is. New South Wales is where Sydney is. So there's a big difference between the two states in the way people interact and how they like to spend their time. Victorians like to watch sport, and Melbourne is the sporting capital of the world. There's so much sport there, so on any given weekend there can be tennis, cricket, basketball, baseball even, Australian football, rugby league, soccer, anything. There's a lot going on.
A lot of sports.
So baseball is popular in Australia?
It's one of those sports that's becoming more popular, and that's another very interesting thing that's shared between American and Australian cultures is the spread of sport.
Well, baseball is of course an American sport. It was invented in America. We have three very popular sports in America that were all invented in America: baseball, basketball, and then what we call American football, which is a very complicated game that came from rugby, but is very different than rugby.
So it's originally
British. Yeah, but American football has a lot of rules.
What's the king sport in America?
The king sport?
Yeah.
Well, we think about baseball as our national sport. But actually, football is a little bit more popular. More people watch football. But all three, football, baseball, and basketball, are all very, very popular in America. And most American people follow the professional sports. And most children will learn to play these games when they grow up.
How about in Australia?
In Australia, again, as I said before, the differences in states is very, very different. So in New South Wales, where Sydney is, a lot of people will play rugby, and they'll play rugby union or rugby league. And both sports are pretty much the same. It involves very big men running into each other very hard with a very small ball, trying to score points. In Victoria, people play Australian football. And Australian football is quite a complicated sport, and it's played on a very large field, a very big oval, something you play cricket on. So it's hard to find a pitch like that outside of Australia. But, like you said with American football, Australian football is taught at a very young age, and it's sort of the national sport of Australia, I would say.
So Joseph,
So
are
now-
American sports popular in Australia?
American sports are very popular in Australia.
Everyone watch basketball?
Everyone loves basketball. Everyone downloads the NBA championships, and the amount of people walking around with jerseys of Derrick Rose and Shaquille O'Neal on the back. It's very interesting to see the spread of the American sporting and, in extension, the culture to Australia.
Now, I heard that a cricket match can sometimes last for days. Is it true?
It's true. It's true. Cricket, the longest game they have goes over 3 days. And let me tell you, I've been to one day. Every year there's a traditional Boxing Day test. So the day after Christmas, on the 26th, there's a very big cricket game between a touring country, and it lasts for the whole day. And I don't think there's anyone in the stadium who can walk out at the end and say they didn't fall asleep during the match, because it is boring.
So can you explain a little bit more about cricket game?
Sure. Cricket is, again, a sport that came from the Commonwealth, so it's traditionally a British sport, and they play it in Australia, and Australia is actually quite good at it. Cricket involves one team will be batting and one team will be bowling. So the object of the game is to score as many runs as you can in as many times that the other team has to bowl. It's actually quite complicated when you get down to it, but pretty much there's a set of sticks and a very, very, very hard ball. If you ever get the chance to look up cricket highlights or see the ball, it's made of incredibly thick cork with leather on the outside. And it gets dangerous because people throw this ball at about 90 kilometers an hour. And the object of the game is for another player to hit the ball. So there's elements of baseball in cricket. The same with the ball and a bat, and people get out by hitting cord or by hitting the stumps, which can kind of mean throwing the ball back to the base. So there are some similar elements. But cricket is a very interesting sport, but you have to be very patient to watch it because it does get very boring.
Now, what about real football, which in America we call soccer, the game where you kick the ball? Is that popular in Australia? Because it is not popular at all in America.
It's interesting because it is quite popular in Australia. Again, depending on where you live in Australia. A lot of people in Australia, it's a very multicultural country, same as America. A lot of different cultures, a lot of different people living there. And these people brought their own sports and cultures. So there's a lot of European people in Australia who would have always played soccer. So soccer is becoming more popular through the national team's success that America has also seen. But overall, it is still kind of viewed like a bit of a, I'd say, a pansy, a weaker sport. Maybe if you can't play rugby, if you can't play AFL, if you can't play NFL, maybe you play soccer instead. But that's not true at all.
But I think that maybe America and Australia might be the only two countries that don't love soccer.
You're right, yeah. Maybe it's the rich, traditional sports that each country has and has been growing with since they were established as countries, which is always interesting as well.
Questions?
So can you offer some specialities? Food.
Food.
Talk about food. We forgot to talk about food.
Okay. One thing that is very important to know about both countries is that we have many people that come from all over the world to live in Australia and to live in America. So it is difficult to say that there is one kind of American food or one kind of Australian food.
Very hard.
Because we have many different cultures and many different traditions and many different kinds of food. So it's very easy in America to find Vietnamese food, Chinese food, Greek food, German food, Thai food, food from all over the world. But I think that when most people think of American food, they think of course, the hamburger. Which, and that is a very, very American food. You can find hamburgers everywhere.
You think of America, you think of hamburger.
Yeah, and hot dogs.
Hot dogs.
Right? And what makes these two things so popular? Well, it's what people cook when they are hanging out together outside. When they have a barbecue, they make hot dogs and hamburgers because it's easy to cook on the grill. So they're really popular, especially in the summer, and at sporting events and other outdoor activities.
And that's exactly the same as Australia. People love to barbecue. They love to, I guess we've already covered that both countries enjoy their beef, so
So we have nothing in common. We both love barbecue.
yep, Australians love sausages and cheeseburgers and hamburgers and all the rest of it. I'd say specifically, there's no national dish of Australia. There's no particular one item that can be quintessentially Australian. People like meat pies, which is pastry and a shell with meat inside and pastry on top. And people love to eat those at sporting events.
We don't have that in the United States.
At all.
No. Well, I don't know, but I have never seen it. Yeah.
One thing that we do have in Australia is a thing called Vegemite, though.
Oh.
And this is, I brought some today for hopefully my American friend to try.
Oh yeah, I'd love to try it. Can I have a spoon?
A spoon or
Yeah.
a finger. Vegemite.
A spoon or a finger doesn't work.
Vegemite is a very, should I say what it is before you try
No,
it?
tell them.
Vegemite is a,
Oh my god.
Bonnie, do you want to try some?
you'll have to try it.
Oh, it's like
It's a
Nước
very-
mắm. This one is like Nước mắm. Smell a lot, guys.
Very salty, and I'll let you guys try it first, and then maybe you can tell me how you think Australian people eat this.
How do they make it?
Do you eat with
This is-
bread? It's like this is like jam or.
It's you have it on a toasted piece of bread, and you put a bit of butter, and then you slather on this beautiful, thick, black Vegemite,
Oh my god.
and everyone in Australia loves it. And it's made from yeast, so it was actually used a long time ago. Vegemite, which is similar to what the British have, which is Marmite, was used to preserve meats for very long periods of time when they didn't have a refrigerator. Back in the days, they would cover it in Vegemite, and that would stop the meat rotting.
But now they only eat it with bread.
Now
right?
you only eat it with bread.
Okay, here we go. Cheers. Oh my god. It's so salty.
Can we have?
Oh,
Is that?
Woo. You eat that in the morning?
every morning. I love
Make you just wake up right away.
Straight away.
Oh.
Oh, very small amount. What do you think?
It's salty, but also a little bit bitter.
This is mắm tôm.
Like it's 100 years old.
It's a very popular dish, and something that it's very interesting to see other people try, because everyone loves it in Australia, but everywhere else in the world it's a bit of an interesting flavour.
We have an answer. Canberra is the capital city of Australia.
Canberra is the capital.
Canberra, we have the winner. So whoever you are, just contact us. You have this fermented combination of nước mắm and mắm tôm.
Congratulations! I'm sure you'll enjoy it as much as these guys did.
Okay.
All right.
Do you have any more questions?
Oh, where can we buy those in Vietnam? Can we buy
Oh, where do you buy it?
This came from a group of Australian school children who came here, and I met up with them, and they brought this, and they brought it to the local orphanage here to get the children to try it. Part of a process, and it was they didn't tell anyone what it was. They just got a little bit and put it on some crackers, and then they let all the kids take it. But before they let anyone eat it, they all got their cameras ready, and then all the kids ate it, and their faces turned to they hated it, and there was all these hilarious
I think I can
photos.
grow into this.
So in Australia, do children eat this?
Oh yeah,
Everybody eats it.
everybody eats that.
Oh, okay.
I've known some people to just, if they just want something salty, they'll just get a big spoon of Vegemite, put it in their mouth, and then walk away. They're happy with that.
Oh my god. Okay.
All right. Is it expensive?
No, very cheap. It's very easy to make. It's just yeast, so it's a matured bacteria.
So we have this similar thing like this in Vietnam. So we usually eat bread with condensed milk. So we also have like a little pack like this, but with condensed milk.
Sweet.
It's very sweet,
Okay.
not
Not.
salty. Okay. So to continue on our talk, any differences that you think that worth mentioning?
Well, I would like to know a little bit about education, about school in Australia. What is it like?
School in Australia is very, there's a lot of focus on, I guess it's similar to America and Australia both have very, very high levels of education. Very, very high levels, some of the best in the world. I guess it's pretty consistent all the way through. In Australia, there's a big focus on sport. The country wants to keep its young people healthy and active. Towards high school, it's sort of a straight high school and you'll finish in year 12. And again, depending on where you live, if you live in Victoria, you'll do one set of final exams. If you live in Sydney, you'll do a different set. If you live in the Capital Territory, you'll do a different set. It's different where you live.
So what is the name of the test? Because I know that in America people do SAT.
SAT is
SAT?
Yeah, SAT is a test that that children who finish high school, which is what we call secondary school, they take this test before they go to university, which we call college. University is very, very important in America. Many people go, and there are many hundreds of different universities in America. American culture really thinks that going to university is important. Why? Because they want people to get good jobs. They want people to be more productive, to make more things, make more money, so that America can continue to grow and swell.
It's interesting you say in Australia you have the option after you finish 10 years of school, you don't have to do the final 2 years if you don't want to. You can drop out in year 10, so when you're about 16, and they have that option there because Australia has a very rich tradition of tradesmen and building and workers. So a lot of people will be part of the family, say their dad is a plumber, a welder, a builder, and the son or the daughter wants to follow in those footsteps. They don't want to get a university education because they're going to be a builder. So instead, they'll leave the schooling system, they won't go to university, they'll go to a specialized college, university sort of area where you learn very specific and practical skills related to different trades. So there's that option, which is very interesting, and I don't think I've seen it in other countries. And I don't know if it's the small size of the population or the type of culture that's there of sort of hard-working, blue-collar individuals still very, and to be honest, in Australia, as a tradesman, you can make a very, very large sum of money from a very early age through proper marketing and through development that way.
Can you go to university for free in Australia, or do people pay for it?
In Australia, the government has set up a student loan system. So if I was Australian, so I got to go to university at the time for free, but once I start earning a certain amount of money, I will have to pay back all the money that my university degree costs. So it's pretty much an extended student loan.
See, in America we have a problem because our universities are very expensive and everybody wants to go. So they borrow a lot of money and then they have to work a lot after university just to pay the money back. We do not have very many programs where the government pays for the school. Most schools have a fee and most people just pay with their own money.
Interesting.
So there's a funny question here. Can you say the word schedule?
Oh, schedule.
Schedule.
Oh, really? Not the British way. Of course, the British would say what?
Schedule.
Schedule?
Schedule.
Schedule.
So we have a question. So what is the pronunciations of schedule in US and us? So
sounds almost the same.
Sound almost the same. You got it. Okay. What is the big pronunciation difference between us and us?
Well, one word I like to bring the example of, Australians, the word are, as in So art is the correct pronunciation. Say, I like visual art, but in Australia people go art.
Yeah. Yeah, well, of course, the sound R is very different in American English. We pronounce all of our R's. We sort of growl art. Or, for example, the word mother, right? We'll say at the end. How do you say it?
Mother.
Mother.
Well,
right?
that's very British, actually. Mother.
Well, I think that Australian English is more like British English than American English.
Exactly.
It sounds more like British English.
One word actually, I've noticed American people, in Australia they'll say herbs and spices. But in America people say
Herbs. Herbs and spices.
Yeah, that's an interesting difference because I would imagine herb is a very sort of colloquial even. But
Yeah, nobody says herbs.
Yeah, well, I
It's
wonder
just
why.
Herbs.
herb.
Yeah. But of course it's herb.
Strong R's.
So do you drive? Do you have in the right in Australia?
Do I have?
Drive in the right.
You drive on the right hand side of the road in Australia.
So,
Really?
Same as in Vietnam. Which is
And same as in America.
Well, there we go.
On the right side.
Oh. No, I'm terribly sorry. I've been out of Australia for too long. We drive on the left-hand side of the road. There's my mistake. I apologize.
So
it's very
because
shocking because all I heard is that you like on the left side.
Left-hand side.
Oh,
left-hand
it's like-
side. So it means that the cars are different, right?
Totally different. The driver's seat is on the right hand. That's how I got confused. The driver's seat is on the right, and the passenger's on the left, and you drive on the left-hand side of the road. So it can get confusing, and there's been a lot of times when American tourists have come, and it's hard to wrap your head around driving on the complete opposite side of the road, because obviously if you drove on the opposite side of the road in the country you drove on the right-hand side of the road, you'd be in trouble.
And of course then, if you are sitting on the right side, you have to shift with your left hand.
Yep.
Right?
Left hand using the clutch.
Yeah. So in America, the cars are just like the cars in Vietnam. You sit on the left to drive, and you shift with the right hand.
Minh Man said, hello Atis. So his name is Man.
Oh yeah. Hi, Man. How are you? Thanks for watching.
Okay, we have a request. And since we have around 5 minutes left, so you guys want to sing a song because we have a request of a song.
Which song?
You would like to sing a song?
Which song?
So we have Giao, and she said, sorry for you guys. Mr. Artist, can you sing a Vietnamese song and an American song?
I don't know any Vietnamese songs, unfortunately.
American song, like pretty much any.
It'd be hard if someone was to ask me to sing an Australian song. I wouldn't know which song to sing. I think that there's a rich culture of music.
Actually, Royal, the singer, is from
New Zealand.
Oh, sorry, my
Royal's
bad.
from New Zealand.
So who are the most famous Australian singers?
Most famous Australian singers.
Is Tom Jones Australian?
He is, I
Or is he
think.
Welsh?
Kylie Minogue. is
Kylie,
Australian.
oh sweet Kylie.
She's Australian. And to be honest, there's a lot of Australian people outside of Australia don't tend to know too many Australian. In Excess is an old band
Oh, great
from
band.
Australia.
Do you know?
No.
Old, from the 1980s.
Yeah.
Long before
I
you.
wasn't born then.
Yeah.
But actors as well, if anyone has seen the Avengers movie, the actor who plays Thor, he's
The
Australian.
Hems?
Chris Hemsworth? He's Australian?
He's Australian.
Yes.
Oh. Australians are very good at doing American accents, I think.
Miranda here is from Australia.
Miranda Kerr is a beautiful Australian woman. Also Hugh Jackman, who plays Wolverine in X-Men, he's also Australian.
Oh, and Naomi Watts?
Naomi Watts is also Australian.
Hmm.
Nicole Kidman is Australian. There's a lot of Australians.
Yeah.
Been a good place to, like, it's a good country with beautiful people.
A lot of beautiful people in both countries, but a lot of people love to live in Australia close to the beach, so you get a lot of people have tans in Australia. I don't look very Australian because I'm very pale, but if you see an Australian person, more often than not, they'll have a very healthy tan. And very friendly people. If you ever go to Australia and you're lost, if you need directions for somewhere, if you aren't feeling the best, Australian people are very, very good at being your friend. Everyone wants to be your friend and help you out. So
Australians are everywhere in the world. We know that Australian people are friendly. We all Americans think of Australian people as being very friendly. Yeah.
So for the last 5 minutes, if you have any questions for Mr. Atis here and Mr. Joseph here, go ahead and ask. The last 5 minutes will be dedicated for answering questions. For me, I'm going to Australia soon, so do you have any advice for the culture shock? Because I remember we have one questions about culture shock in Australia.
Australia is quite expensive. That's one thing, coming from Vietnam going to Australia, you're going to notice that you're going to be paying a lot of money for the same thing you can get very cheap here, which is unfortunate, but it comes part and parcel, I guess. You get used to it. Culture shock, other than that, I'd say compared to, it'd be the same as going to, I don't think there'd be much of a culture shock going to America either.
No, the cultures of America and Australia are very similar.
Very similar.
They are more alike than they are different. We've talked about some of the differences, but for the most part, they're very similar cultures.
Very similar.
Well, that's one thing I'm worried about, is that I heard that the wildlife in Australia is really scary, really urban, like they are in the city all the time.
Yes, Australia does have quite the abundance of dangerous and even deadly animals, and also some very unique animals. But in Australia, you will get spiders as big as my hand. Luckily, those ones they
As
don't
big as my face.
they don't bite you, but they'll hang around. And it's not very nice to walk into your bathroom, look down at the toilet, and see a giant spider there. It's not the nicest feeling. There's a lot of beautiful wildlife though. There are some snakes, unfortunately. Beautiful birds, wombats, platypuses, kookaburras, very interesting animals that you can actually find anywhere else but in Australia. Everyone knows the kangaroo.
I should call kangaroo in Australia, you still call them kangaroo?
Kanga.
Kanga.
You call it a roo. A couple of roos are running around there in the field.
Ooh, couple of guru?
Roos.
Roos.
And do they eat them?
You do eat kangaroo. It's quite tasty.
What does it taste like?
It's sort of a combination between beef and chicken in a way. It's a leaner animal, very muscular as well. Its legs are very powerful, but you can get, it's a great source of protein and it's cheaper than beef. So, and if you go to a supermarket in Australia, I can guarantee you'll find somewhere kangaroo burgers. You can even find alligator burgers, crocodile burgers.
I would definitely try a kangaroo burger.
Delicious.
Okay.
Now what about poisonous animals? You have a lot of poisonous animals,
A lot
don't
of
you?
poisonous animals. In Australia, you could probably find a poisonous animal anywhere you look in Australia. There's lots of poisonous spiders that you have to be careful about. But one of the good things in Australia is you can live, if you're not too upset about living with creepy crawlies, they actually do a good job because there are a lot of mosquitoes in Australia and a lot of flies. A lot of people like to say that when you get out of the airport in Australia, you'll meet a fly, and that fly will follow you around because it's impossible to get rid of flies. They're everywhere. There's a traditional Australian hat people have. They wear it with a wide brim and corks at the end, so they can shake their head and the corks move the air so all the flies will go away. But these deadly animals, the spiders, they'll live in your house, but they'll get rid of all the flies. They'll eat all the mosquitoes, so it's good to have them around. But you have to know which ones are dangerous and which ones to touch and which ones to not touch, because
I would touch his head.
That's always a good thing to do. Just stay safe and avoid them.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here today. I think we don't have any time left. So if you don't have the chance, if you didn't see this video today, you can obviously watch it again. If you have any questions for Atis and Joseph, just go ahead and message us on our Facebook page and we will reply very soon. Thank you very much.